Now, a Kenya Kwanza parliamentary group meeting held today had the leaders backing the president's hardline stance against the opposition and accusing Azimio leader Raila Odinga of using the demonstrations to settle old scores following his loss in the last general election. Now, the leaders claimed that Raila Odinga is using the protests to force a power-sharing agreement, vowing that a handshake is not an option that the Kenya Kwanza government is willing to consider. Now, the leaders have condemned the violence occasioned by the demonstrations, which they say have caused loss of innocent lives, massive destruction of property, and loss of business revenue.
It is less than 3 days before supporters of the Azimio la Umoja coalition go back to the streets to heed the call of their leaders to sustain protests against the high cost of living and punitive taxes by the government. And as the countdown continues, government-allied leaders have vowed to thwart plans by the opposition before they even start. At a Kenya Kwanza parliamentary group meeting, leaders of majority in both the National Assembly and the Senate, Kimani Ichungwa and Aaron Cheruyot, questioned the motive by the Azimio leader Raila Odinga, accusing him of being sponsored to cause mayhem. In a statement issued after the meeting, the two leaders claimed that the Azimio leader is using the protest to settle scores over his defeat in the last general election. They accused the opposition of flouting the legal requirements for holding protests in Kenya by organizing protests that have occasioned loss of innocent lives, massive destruction of property, and loss of business revenue. They claim that the protests are geared towards forcing a power-sharing agreement and a desire to get into government by way of a backdoor. They accuse the opposition of abusing the freedom to assemble as enshrined in Article 37 of the Constitution by allegedly hiring gangs to create mayhem, anarchy, and attempting to sabotage a legitimately elected government, threatening that this form of blackmail campaign will fail. They say that there is no room for a handshake. The leaders saying that the violent demonstrations have been financed by Odinga's sponsors in the former government, with youths being mobilized and paid between 500 and 3,000 shillings each to participate in the protests. The leaders called on the Inspector General of Police and the Director of Public Prosecutions to investigate all acts of criminality, arrest perpetrators and charge them, as well as charge the alleged financiers and mobilizers of the criminal gangs. The leaders want the court to dispense with the case on the Finance Act of 2023 to allow Kenyans to enjoy what they term as its transformational measures. The Kenya Kwanza parliamentary group meeting agreed not to give in to what they termed as blackmail by the opposition. Sources privy to the meeting disclosed that the MPs complained about certain quarters within the security hierarchy who allegedly share intelligence with the opposition leaders to help them stay ahead of the security forces deployed to tame violence during the demonstrations. The leaders agreed to protect lives and property of Kenyans. Safin Acheng Omar, Citizen TV.